it's funny, if you look at the forecast for growth this year, it's really remarkably, the headline numbers remarkably robust, right? We still think that China's going to grow above 5% this year, and that's pretty much the consensus. Unfortunately, the reason for that 5% growth is not because China's got robust momentum, it's just because 2022 was so disastrous, right? In 2022, we had Shanghai being locked down, we had other big parts of the country being locked down. COVID was still a really big drag on activity. When those controls were removed at the end of 2022, we had activity surging back.
Yep.
What that means is we have the sort of artificial impression of very strong growth this year. In fact, it's just the base effect from those COVID lockdowns last year. The reality is much more sluggish.
Tom, thanks so much for giving us some of your time. We really appreciate getting your perspective. We know you lived and worked in Beijing for many years, so you have a unique person on the ground type of perspective. Tom Orlik, he's a chief economist for Bloomberg Economics, joining us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. Again, the weaker economy in China, probably not what the markets were anticipating coming into the year.
And what that means potentially for the Fed, when we do think they are close to being done with their tightening campaign.
Yep, very interesting. S&P 500 off 0.1% this morning. Right now, let's get world and national news. We'll go down to Washington, D.C., and Amy Morris has got that for us.
All right, thank you, Paul. Getting word at this hour, Senator Dianne Feinstein was briefly hospitalized last night after a fall in her San Francisco home. That's according to the San Francisco Chronicle. U.S. and Saudi Arabia have agreed on an outline for a deal for Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel in exchange for some security guarantees. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. officials are cautiously optimistic they can hammer out details within the next year. Voters in Ohio have rejected a measure that's being seen as a test over abortion rights.
The proposition known as Issue 1 would have made it harder to pass constitutional changes. It would have mandated a supermajority, 60%, where it is now a simple majority. Now, this was put on the ballot in an effort to short-circuit a proposition on the November ballot to change the Constitution to codify abortion rights. Abortion, of course, has been a state-by-state issue since the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling. The vote margin? Wide. The initiative failing 56 to 43%. I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Kerik has been interviewed by January 6th prosecutors.
Kerik is a close ally of Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York. Several media outlets say prosecutors asked Kerik about Trump's fundraising efforts and questions about fraud in the 2020 election. Kerik was said to sit down for a voluntary interview Monday. According to Kerik's attorney, the former commissioner told prosecutors that Giuliani's team looking into the allegations of fraud received no money from the Save America PAC. Save America was one of the chief groups assigned to hunt down evidence that the election had been marred by cheating. In New York, Michael Barr, Bloomberg Radio.
And the judge overseeing the election interference case has scheduled a hearing for this Friday in Washington. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.